Hello and welcome to Skimo Gold, the premier podcast and YouTube show for ski mountaineering interviews and race analysis. Thanks to camp for keeping us going. One thing I like to do with my kids in the wintertime is taking them to those climbing gyms. And if you want to get in a rock gym with you, or your friends or your kids, or maybe just yourself hitting up that auto belay, check out Camp Stuff. They have awesome harnesses. They've got all the quick draws that you need. They got helmets, everything you want to get into the rock gym. Check out Camp. All right, folks, race analysis. This is the first of many episodes we have planned in this category, and I am pumped to bring these to you after the World Cup events, before and after the Olympics, of course. Hopefully, we'll get some for the long course world champs at Pierre Armenta and maybe some other key events as well. Today, Catie Friend and I are talking about the recent Courchevel World Cup over there in France. They had a sprint race and a vertical. You may know Catie, previous guest on Skimo Gold. And if you don't know Catie, she is the legendary voice of ski mountaineering. You've seen her for years as ISMF course announcer and also live stream announcer. There is no one in the Skimo world who knows more history and minutia about Skimo. She knows all the athletes, and she also just has the stoke and the energy. So big thanks to Catie for joining us. You can find her on Instagram. We've got a little info from Cam Smith, our usual host, at Cam from CB on Instagram. Cam's preparing for the Olympics by doing these World Cups, so we'll share some of his feedback on the race as well. All right, folks, it's time to roll on Skimo Gold. Catie Friend, so great to be here with you discussing the World Cup that happened recently in Courchevel, France. We had 4 races. We had the sprint for the women and the men, and then also the vertical for women and men. I loved it. I thought it was great coverage. We got to see the sprint streamed live with you and our friend Nikki La Rochelle doing the commentary. And again, I think it was just fantastic. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, Catie, set the scene. What should we know about that location in Courchevel? Any history of the area? Were any of the competitors living in Courchevel? And just overall, what did you think of the atmosphere there?
Well, it is the second time, 2 years in a row now that we've been in Courchevel. So it was really nice to be back. And I think what is quite nice about the ISMF using sort of regular places is that they can do what they did with Courchevel is they did it first time last year and then they amended the course this year. And we're going to talk about that, I know, a little bit later on, but it gave them a chance to sort of take the groundwork and then make it better, in my opinion. And Courchevel, well, I mean, it's most famous for being one of the most exclusive European resorts. It's wildly expensive to live there and to party there, as I understand. But it is beautiful, and it is part of the biggest linked ski area in the world, which is the very famous Three Valleys, also includes Maribel and the likes of those. And if anyone was paying attention to the very wide shots, they may have seen the ski jump from the 1992 Albertville Olympics. That is sort of the main thing, because the sprint was based in Le Prat, which is a part of Courchevel, one of the lower resorts at about 1350. In fact, used to be known as Courchevel 1350, I believe. And and then the vertical started from there. So it's kind of an important part of the Courchevel bigger system, if you like. And it's it's a really, really amazing, incredibly exciting ski area, the Three Valleys.
Yeah. Oh, man. It sounds a little bit like a place called Aspen, Colorado, that some listeners may have been to in terms of the prestige and number of resorts around. Listeners, go back, check out that ISMF coverage, because it is just so beautiful. And I think, is this the home or training base of Emily Harrop, the Queen of Skimo from France?
It is.
Am I right
It
about
is
that?
indeed. yes, and apologies, you did ask me that, and I got so carried away that I forgot to mention that. Yes, you see right across the front of her helmet have done for quite a while. Courchevel, she has had that. So I don't think she's actually Courchevel, but yes, that is absolutely her home turf.
All right, excellent. Well, let's get into it. So the sprint race will go through first. If you're not familiar with Skimo, brief explanation: the sprint is awesome for TV. As I explained yesterday, I was watching the Denver Broncos playoff game. This is American football, folks. It's season's getting hot. The Bears won as well. Got shout out to Cam Smith. He's a Chicago Bears fan. Broncos and Bears both in the NFC and AFC playoff. If you're into football, that's big. Anyway, halftime of the Broncos game, I'm showing my friends, these are people who know nothing about Skimo. Hey guys, here's Skimo. We went back, we watched the Solitude coverage. It was great. So anyway, if you're in that case, here's the sprint. It's easy to understand, pretty simple. 6 people, the gun goes off, they skin uphill, they keep skinning, they're going through these diamonds, they're basically running on skis. At some point, they take the skis off their feet and put them on their back, and then they run up the hill. And some courses, they're running through the snow. This course, Catie, and I thought this was awesome, there were these stairs. I think you said 65 stairs. It looked like a freaking wall that they're going up. And these are steep stairs. They gained a lot of elevation. They look like they were slippery. You know, they put in these basically wood slats to make the stairs. And I think those early heats, there's probably some ice on them, but super challenging. You get to the top of those stairs, put the skis back on your feet, and then skin up some more. And uniquely about this Courchevel course, that top skinning part appeared to be the steepest skinning of the whole course, which makes it quite challenging because at that point, you know, you are totally oxygen deprived, can barely think straight. And it was so steep. Some of these world-class athletes were even sliding back at times, you know, having trouble getting that grip. Anyway, at the top, you take the skins off the skis, click them into downhill mode, and then race down through gates, you know, basically giant slalom style gates to the finish. And the bottom of this course was exciting as well because you get through those gates and then you go off a jump. And then they had these whoop-de-doos, maybe 3 or 4 of them, these rollers. And boy, I tell you what, if it looked to me, if you go off those too fast and catch too much air, you're actually going to smash into the next one. So you almost have to, you know, kind of like a pump track with your bike. You got to pump them up and down and make it through safely. And it got a little spicy in there. So anyway, that's the course for the sprint. And I thought it was just super exciting, Catie. Before we get to the actual results, did you have any thoughts on the course? Oh, and the other thing I want to mention, the camera angles. Something happened here. I don't know if the ISM got a new camera crew. I'm hoping that these are techniques that may be applied upcoming at the Olympics, because one thing we saw at the beginning was a strafing camera. I think it was on a drone, but it basically stayed next to the athletes, and you really had a sense of how fast they are going. These men and women are flying. I mean, they're running uphill with skis way faster than most people could run, you know, on a track or something. I thought that was super cool. I loved the overhead shots where the drone got right on top and you could really get a sense of athletes choosing lines, you know, kind of making slight adjustments, making a surge, etc. I thought the camera stuff was awesome and innovative. Any brief reflections on all that, Catie?
Well, yes, I'm not sure I can be brief, but I'll do my best. It's not my forte. So let's talk about first the course. I love what they did actually with this course. They took it was quite a simple sort of like a upside down U last year, for want of a better expression. It was sort of straight up and then straight down. I mean, there was a bit of wiggle on the way down, and with including an extremely sharp left-hand turn to the finish. But this year they made it, and the best word I could think of it was twistier on the way up and on the way down, even though I think they sort of smoothed out a little bit that last left-hand turn into the finish line. But I loved the fact that the diamonds sort of, you know, it was quite a short run from the start to the first set of diamonds, and it sort of kicked off to the left, so that you had, you know, they had to make a good choice on their recce's at the beginning. They had to decide, you know, where to go. get the right camber and so on. And then those steps, I mean, it's a controversial thing, building steps, you know.
Yeah.
The Skimo purists would say, what a load of absolute nonsense. They'd prefer like they had in Solitude, which is, you know, a proper old school boot pack. But I think, you know, as you say, part of the appeal of the sprint is that it is TV worthy. You know, it's exciting to watch. And I think it gives people who perhaps don't know that much about Skimo something else to sort of, it is quite distinctive and yeah, not easy at all. I think slightly easier in that they are the same. So you can get into a rhythm. Often in the sort of freestyle, if you like, boot packing of old, you know, it's more difficult, especially for people who are shorter, because quite often the steps get put in by taller people. It's often a disadvantage to the women. Not that all the women are short and all the men are tall, but no. So it's good. It looks good, and as you say, I mean, we didn't see it on any of the live, but in the qualifications there were a few tumbles, as you say. They did look a bit slippery. And I loved that last section, I think, because last year it was a very odd, is probably maybe a little harsh, but it was 1 meter of vertical after the steps to the top transition. And as Nikki said, you could see them just coming in so hot to that last transition, because their momentum was massive, having to screech to stop them shooting through the transition area. So this was much better, and as you say, gave a real challenge to some of the best ski mountaineers in the world. Just suddenly, like this, it was between 16 and 23% that last bit, and that is crazy steep. And you could see them really sort of bending over, trying to get up there. So I love that. I love the downhill, as you say, the sort of ski cross-esque with the jump and the gates and the rollers at the end. Nikki was particularly excited about the rollers. She was really like, ooh, you know, heart in mouth. There were a couple of moments there, especially towards the end in the men's races when they were super close. And yes, the camera angles. So they had a camera on a rail. I don't know if you saw it from the start that went right up the side. And that was really great for us. And I think, well, for the viewers in general, it was very good for us as commentators. But it was also, so the drone shots, that is not new. But what I have found a lot in the commentating from the beginning of this is that the ability to get the balance on the drones right, so you can actually see what's what, rather than just, you know, you can't see colors. The white is so blown out that everything else seems just like black dots, and these were close and clear, and that was for me really great, and you could see those diamonds so beautifully.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. Yeah. My final thought on those steps, the way these particular steps were built, it appeared to me they were tall steps, but also fairly short. And there's a range. Some courses you'll see a shorter step, but the landing part is longer, and it's a different type of movement, a different type of running. These tall steps, it appeared to me that the main thing is this is an advantage for tall men who are tall enough to skip steps. And we saw, for example, Oriol Cardona Cole, I think Arno Lieta, maybe a couple other guys who could almost the whole way up there, you know, doubling steps. And most guys, I was watching Max Drione, who typically is very strong on the foot part, but he's just not that tall. He's doing an extremely rapid cadence on every step, because clearly that was, his legs just aren't long enough. So that's interesting. And getting a little aside, but looking ahead to Bormio, the Olympic course, remind us, Catie, I forgot the foot part there. Am I right? That is steps, but it's maybe they're not quite this steep. I can't quite remember. Do you recall?
I can't remember either.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess
can't
we'll
remember.
have to look back
But the
and
thing
see.
is, I mean, the thing is, the long-legged men have an advantage regardless of the steps.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Because the long limbs, they're sort of built for that. And I actually said the one person I noticed I mean, there are a few that are particularly strong, and we'll probably come to that in the steps. But Oriol, Arnoleta, but Niccolo Canclini, and I said this on the broadcast
Yeah.
because he's bigger built than many of the sort of very small
Yep.
ski mountaineers, and I feel like that those sort of strong thighs, for not trying to get too into body shapes, but he's got quite a good build for that. He's got quite a
Oh
good
yeah. Yeah.
musculature,
Yeah.
even though he's
Yeah.
not particular. I mean, he's not short, but he's not particularly hugely tall, not like Arnolieta tall.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense. It's almost like you look at cycling, the typical build of a Tour de France winner is different from, an Olympic track cyclist or even a classics cyclist who,
Yeah.
typically has more strength and mass. And that's kind of a bit of, what we're seeing here. This sprint is different from a vertical or an individual, although we will get into, there were a number of athletes at this event who did very well in both the sprint and the vertical. And Cam Smith sent in some notes, but he said he was particularly impressed with those athletes who did that. So we'll share that down the road. But let's
Hmm.
why don't we get into the results for the sprints, and then we'll move to the vertical. I'll read off the top six, and then we can kind of go back through the heats and so forth. All right, on to the top six for the women's vertical. We had first was Emily Harrop of France, followed by Margot Ravenel, also France. Julia Murata, Italy, third. Marianne Faton, Switzerland, in fourth. Tatiana Pollard, Germany, and Johanna Hiemer from Austria, rounding out the podium. And I think, was that Johanna's first appearance in a World Cup sprint final?
Well, I thought so at the time, but I was wrong. In fact, it was her second time
Hmm.
in a sprint final. But I mean, just amazing. And maybe we'll get on to her personally. But I thought she's one of my performances of the day, actually.
Yeah. Cam and I were able to interview her. Listeners, go back earlier episodes of Skimo Gold, and this was over the summer. I mean, she's laser focused. She has two young kids. They're piling the kids in the camper van, traveling around to these training camps, and here it comes with great season form. And I believe she's Olympic bound in the mixed relay with Paul Verbniak for Austria. Boy, she's looking great, and Paul also had a great performance in the vertical.
Yeah, I mean, Johanna Hiemer, the Austrian women, there aren't very many of them. I think only three. And she is a bit of an all-rounder. She is going to the Olympics with Paul Verbniak. Their performance in the mixed relay has really been fantastic. Although I'm not sure there anybody in the world that's had more fourth places in anything, which they must be a bit fed up with. But
Mm-hmm.
but what is amazing, and Nikki and I mentioned it during the broadcast, is that she must have worked so hard over the summer on the explosivity and the
Yeah.
speed, and not just within the sprint itself, but the ability to keep that, which is so difficult, because if you qualify, then your semis, then heats, then semis, then final, the ability to keep that is like a weird endurance event
Oh yeah.
where you just so she has just worked so hard, and I know that she has incredible home support. I think her mum is a magnificent support, because having two young kids and doing this level of training and support, without that kind of support is almost impossible, I would say.
And yeah, double click on that. I meant to mention at the beginning, by the finals in the sprint, these athletes have done that course full four times in one day. And if you know that you're one of the best, you might be able to ease back a little bit in the qualifier and even in the heats. Most of the athletes, though, it's all out, even in those qualifiers. And maybe this is a good time to mention American athletes. We had a number in the qualifiers on the women's side. There was Haley Hafman and Brooke Scott. Both did the qualifiers. And then on the men's side making it through the qualifiers into the heats was Griffin Briley, young American athlete. I think that maybe this is his first time in the World Cups at the elite level. So great to Griffin to make it into the heats. In his heat, it was the same heat as Oriol Cardona Cole. And Griffin was about 10 seconds back of Oriol. And when I looked at that, you know, that's awesome to be in that position. And then we also had the other American men who were in the qualifiers. Ian Clark was at 2:55 in 33rd place. Arthur Whitehead was at 2:58 in his qualifier, and Cam Smith was at 3 minutes flat in his qualifier. So they were both in the mix. I think the fastest qualifier for men was or Orioles' winning time at the end was 2:41. So the point is, just to make it into the heats takes an incredibly high level. And for many, you know, the American athletes currently, a very good performance in the qualifiers can maybe get you into the heats.
Yeah, and it's so hard because, as you say, if you're a bit less experienced, you wanna go all out, but you don't want to give everything because you might get through. And then, as you
Yeah.
say, you might be a young guy like Griffin Briley, who is my son's absolute hero.
Mm.
But you're, talented and, an under 18, under 20, very strong athlete, but your first season as a senior and you end up in the same heat as Oriol Cardona Cole. I mean, that's gotta, take some sort of mental strength to do that, to suddenly go, oh my gosh, I'm in the big leagues. And I know Griffin had a couple of senior sort of forays last season, but this is it for real now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, he's coming. Keep at it, Griffin. And all the others. We're behind you all. Let's get into the men's race. Boy, more excitement in the heats and the semis and the finals. You know, I was watching these heats and just noticing little ways the sport is moving forward. Gear wise, I talked with an interview with Oriol Cardona Cole. We're talking about, you know, some of these sprint specific skis that are tapered at the tail so that they slide into the loop on the pack easier. Cam Smith mentioned that some companies are making poles that are even stiffer to allow for that greater force and greater propulsion. And then we're also noticing the packs. Last year, I only saw it on one person, and this was Emily Harrop. It's a unique pack from Millet, and it looks more like almost a running hydration vest, but it's really it's bare bones. It's super light. It's form fitting, and it's just for carrying those skis on the back. What I noticed, I think, new this time is a sprint and mixed relay specific pack from Dynafit that is kind of a different design, but it has a very robust loop that you stick the skis in. And then the pack itself has an interesting wedge shape on the back, which is actually tapered. If you look at an athlete's back, I saw mostly green packs, it's tapered at the top and it's shifting to the right with the concept, I believe, that the skis lay against it very nicely and just come on and off nice and smooth. And these little things, you know, they're minuscule differences, but they could be the difference between a win and a loss. Having your skis in the exact right place. Sometimes you get the skis on, but if they're misplaced and you pull that hook off, it kind of gets tangled up a little bit. And even if that's half a second, you know, that could be a difference. So things moving forward. And then also I want to point out a technique difference that I'm seeing. I call it toe running, but it's basically where an athlete is running uphill on skis very fast, and instead of the heel coming down and hitting the ski as it usually would for either running or a more typical kick and glide technique, the athlete is running in such a way that the heel doesn't even come down on the ski. It's just almost wedging in with the toes and running at the same time. And I've been trying this some in my own training. I've been trying it on steeper pitches. I can only do it for about 5 seconds, Catie, because my calves and my Achilles just feel like they're going to explode. It is so much pressure on the lower leg, and not all the athletes are doing it. But I feel like last year watching, I noticed Jan Kistler doing it, maybe some others, and this year I'm seeing a lot of the men doing it, especially on the steep parts. And I went
Mm.
back and I actually watched the Solitude mixed relay, and Tove Andresen of Sweden was doing it a bit in the women's field there as well. So I haven't seen as many women doing it, but I think it may be coming forward. Just as you remarked in the coverage, not so long ago, some of the men were starting to run, most of the women were not. Now we see, these women's sprints, everyone is running pretty much the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I noticed in terms of technique, and I mentioned both of them in the broadcast, but I really sort of wanted to. The first is I watched Oriel Cardona call, and I see it in more in the men, but it's coming throughout, is this extraordinary ability to keep the maximum amount of their skis and skins on the snow at all
Yes.
times.
Yep.
And you can see it, this beautiful technique in Oriol, where he is like a cyclist. You see almost no upper body movement apart from the arms and
Yeah.
all the power. I mean, I once had a training session with Arno Gesser of Switzerland, and he taught me about being in 4-wheel drive as opposed to being in 2-wheel drive, where you're just using your legs.
Yeah.
And
It's a good
obviously
term.
yeah, it's really good. And it works. I mean, it's incredible when you actually engage your upper body and you're using your arms in the right way. But I watched Oriel, and I don't think I've ever seen him be as just beautifully still.
Yeah.
And I thought it was I mean, it may have been before, but it just struck me in that super steep bit. We saw some of the best of them struggling. Arnaud Lieta, Max Drian, they both had little sort of slips in that area. And he just was so smooth, and it's so beautiful to watch. And I think that's part of what's really exciting about, alongside the technology that is advancing within the sport, is just the, as you say, the techniques and the
Yeah.
coaching and the just maybe learning from other sports like cycling,
Yes.
that this very still upper body, apart from the arms, and it must be incredibly hard to coordinate, because if you're using your arms and your legs, how do you keep that torso and the head just beautifully still? And it's all about energy conservation and all that sort of thing. And the other thing I noticed, and I talked about, and you and I have also sort of slightly half discussed, is Nikita Filipov, who has sort of come out of
Yes.
nowhere in the last 2 seasons, and first podium for him, independent neutral athlete. And you can see, as you mentioned, that his technique has improved, but it is, you see him next to an Oriol Cardona call or an Arnaud Lieta, and he still looks quite, for want of a better word, and it is not reflective of him, but a little bit clunky sometimes. And it is
Hmm.
only of poor vocabulary on my behalf, that on my part, that it makes me use that word, but you can see it. So the sheer strength of that young man is
Yeah.
pretty impressive, because you think that where's he going to be once he learns to adopt and take it as second nature, that beautiful, smooth running technique that we see, and a lot of his sort of, his kind of round the diamonds. Once he gets his technique, he's going to be properly a force to be reckoned with, I think.
Yeah, totally. I agree. That really stood out to me because I liked watching Filipov last year. He had these yellow boots that made it, and maybe it was just the yellow boots that almost accentuated that, like you said, the ski and boot coming off the ground more, and it was just raw force. And we're still seeing now the raw force is still there. And this is, some athletes are nice and smooth and composed, and you look at their face and you can't really tell if they're suffering. Other athletes, and I love watching people like this, like, man, they are just grimacing and they are fighting, and like that is Filipov, and it makes it fun to watch. And it seems to me that his technique and probably fitness made a jump. And you're right, as that technique becomes even more fluid, it'll be interesting to see. Quick comparison into cycling, I think you're right, Catie, that this higher cadence and just super smooth, the skin never leaves the ground. It almost reminds me of, you go back to, more traditional riders, Miguel Indurain or Jan Ulrich, and they had a longer crank. They had a crank that was a 175, probably, maybe even longer, and just a lower cadence, and they're mashing, and it was just power. And now we watch the top pro cyclists. I mean, you look at when Remco breaks away, he's out and he's doing 110 RPM for an hour on his own, and he's super aero. And a lot of the top riders are using shorter cranks, 155, 160, 165. It's just differences in form. And I think that you're right. Probably some of these are carrying over. And a lot of, these top Skimo athletes are running a lot. A lot of them are cycling a lot. I'll get into, I was checking out Remy Bonnet's training on Strava. We'll get into that at the end. But yeah, many of these things just carry over. And for the listeners, when you watch it, whether it's this or the Olympics, especially at the start, usually the start is not super steep and it's just incredibly fast. To do what these athletes are doing, which is basically sprinting, but as you said, keeping the ski on the ground, that is almost impossible to do. And I remember when I first started Skimo, I was a young guy and I was a good runner and I thought, I'll just run. But I was like running with my knees up and just bam, 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 clank, clank, clank. And it doesn't work. You have to keep the ski on the ground. You have to glide. And that's what they're doing. And it's amazing to see. Should we get on to the men's results here?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And what I wanted to say about the men's results,
Okay.
I'm sorry, you're probably going to start, but it's just what an extraordinary showing from the Spanish.
Yes. 5 guys in the semis, men's semis. There's 12 men total. 5 were Spanish.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe
really
it.
impressive. And the Spanish team historically, when I first started in this, the Spanish team were known for, first of all, Kilian Jornet, but they're extraordinary women. I mean, they had the most incredible female lineup back in the day, Claudia Galicia and so on. And I know they're bringing that through, and they do have very strong women as well. But my gosh, the density there at the top of the sprint with the Spanish men was really impressive.
Yeah, totally. In those the men's semis were both super exciting. One of them, we had this race to get into the final between Max Drion and a French guy. Maybe you remember
Pablo
his
Giner?
name is. Yes. But right at the end, they were racing on the downhill and there was one spot left and they went back and forth a couple times. The camera didn't catch what happened. Somehow Max got ahead, literally in the final 5 seconds. But it's head to head. It's super tight. And they're taking, I don't know if I'd say inappropriate, but they're taking risks on the downhill, like these little 65 underfoot skis going around gates. And there's times where there's not a place to pass and people are trying to pass. No one got hurt, which is good. And yeah. Max came through. And then in the other semifinal, we had, these top 4 just, again, battling it out. It was Cardona Cole, Filipov, Arnaud Lieta from Switzerland, and then Thibaut Ansome, France, barely made it into the final. But he did. And then,
yes.
In the final, obviously turned out pretty well.
Yeah, I know. And poor Nikki and I both feeling very embarrassed that we had said, that's it, it's all over for Thibaut Anselme after this semi-final. And he made it through because it was a much faster semi-final. So he made it through as the second lucky loser. Which we were, it's not always the best thing for commentators to have an opinion sometimes.
Well, that's part of the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, do you want to read off, Catie, the top 6 from the final?
For sure. Well, Aurel Cardona Cole, European double, 2-time European and world champion, the double, won quite convincingly. Thibaut Anselme, from having been written off by Nikki and myself, in second. Filipov, the independent neutral athlete, had his first ever podium in the World Cup. Then the two Swiss selected athletes for the Olympics, Arno Lieta and Jon Kistler, which is quite entertaining for me. Not entertaining. It's interesting. Arno Lieta, one of the originals, up there with Ivan Arnold, sprint specialist, and the new kid on the block, who's very much come through. He's like the equivalent to Margot Ravenel, I think. But both of them selected to go to the Olympics. They were 4th and 5th, and then Max Drian, who apparently was quite ill all week, the whole time in Courchevel, so not his best showing, but still managed 6th anyway.
Yeah. Alrighty. Wow. As you look at those, does it I don't know, are you seeing any trends or things looking ahead to the Olympics? As I look at this, other than maybe Filipov, it's a lot of the same old names, just Oriol showing top form from last year, carrying into this year. Guy did his work in the off season. They all did, of course.
I mean, I would say that could possibly, very likely be the final for the Olympics, because they're all going, and it's very likely, the only other people I would have expected to see up there were the Bussard twins, but I think they did not have an easy week. They had just found out they hadn't been selected for the Swiss team, which I think was pretty devastating for them, and I think that took a bit of a toll. But yeah, I would say that could be our Olympic final.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. All right, on to the vertical. Catie, any other thoughts on sprint before we do vertical?
Yeah, we kind of skipped over the women. I just wanted to say that I had actually, obviously we saw Ana Alonso coming back from injury, which was incredible, and just so, my gosh, I mean, inspiring is a really overused word. We all know that, but it's just, she has worked so incredibly hard. We were missing Mariana Jegorchikova, who didn't qualify actually, which I didn't actually notice or remark upon until much later on in the broadcast, but quite surprising not to see her in the top 30 at all. And then the other thing I wanted to say, there was a couple of real youngsters in there, Helena Oehringer of Germany and Emma Albrecht of Austria, alongside Eva Matijovicova, the Czech athlete. And just really nice to see some real youngsters coming up. And even those first two, they're not even actually under 23s yet. They're still under 20s. And also interesting to see 3 independent neutral athletes who we don't really know a huge amount about qualified and into the heats.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and that Helena from Germany I saw was 19. We had on the men's side 20-year-old Bu Luer from China. And I'm thinking back to last year's, I think it was the under 23 world champs. Boy, did the Chinese look strong. And I'm very curious, as some of these younger athletes from China get older, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said to you before when you interviewed me that I think that the next Olympics will look very different. I think the Chinese are very strong. The juniors are super strong. But what was interesting to me this week was that there were very few of them there. And I don't think any of them were in solitude. And they are, alongside the Australians, the only team that we don't really have any idea as to who they're sending or thinking of sending to Bormio next month. And so it was quite, I was expecting to see more of the Chinese this weekend, but I don't know, maybe there's a strategy, maybe it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going to be, and their senior athletes are still quite young.
Yep. Cool. Well, Skimo Gold listeners, pay Australia. I'm working on Australia. I'm doing some digging. I happen to know a guy who's used to be a coach, and we're hoping to have an interview with at least one Australian Skimo Olympian coming at you during the Olympic period. And I have a hunch on who it might be, but I'm not going to say it now. But we'll see. And they have, folks, there's snow in Australia. People ski. There's some great skiers from Australia. And final point on Alonso, I'm glad you mentioned. Those who don't know, she was hit by a car while biking in October. quite serious injury, knee, I think shoulder as well. If you check out her Instagram, you can see the comeback. And not only in the sprint was she pretty good, in the vertical, she finished eighth. And like that, to imagine having that fitness and just being able to do that with a knee that has been, non-functional for a lot of the last 3 months, fantastic. So give it another month, man. She might be right there, Olympics time.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, the thing is, she was one of the first to actually win a place at the Olympics. And I'm assuming the selectors are, on tenterhooks waiting to see how she'll do. And by the time we get to Andorra next Monday, that, on the 26th, the selections will have officially been made. But it must be difficult for her, difficult for the selectors as well, because who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Interesting questions, for sure. In these, again, whether it's cycling or running, we're seeing the young elite athletes with the best medical care. Recovery from anything and everything is just faster than it used to be, and that's obviously a lot of that is credit to their hard work. So on to the vertical, listeners. If you're not familiar, the vertical is a race in Skimo where more or less you start at the bottom of the hill and you finish at the top. So it's just all out as hard as you can go. Depending on the course and distance, somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. Typically, sometimes it's a mass start where everyone, your typical race and you're racing head to head. This Courchevel course was interesting because it was a time trial, meaning athletes go off at a regular interval and you don't really know where you are compared to others. You may see someone ahead that you're trying to catch. You may hear someone from behind, or in this case, you may see that headlamp coming because it was at night, which I think is super cool and just adds a neat element to it. So it was a time trial format at night, and more or less you just head off into the dark, burying yourself as you go up this hill to the finish. Catie, reflections on the vertical, and if you want, go ahead and start getting into the results.
Well, just before I get to the results, I don't know what it's like in the States, but nighttime verticals are very much a thing in this part of the world. I live in Switzerland, and it is a really quite magical thing to do, actually. And the Courchevel, the Millier sponsored night race every Wednesday throughout the season in Courchevel. Every man and his dog can go and do this course, and it is so. I think I said it in the broadcast, a lot of the very well-known ski mountaineers we know cut their teeth on it. It's sort of a bit of a test, and it is traditionally time trial style. So they just sort of moved it to be on a Friday and made it into a World Cup event. So, but
Yeah.
it's not a course I'm familiar with, but I think one of the reasons it is so it's time trial is because it's not a wide course, so they can't do a mass start. There's too many. It is not. It's too narrow.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it, but I believe Axel Gachet-Molleret, who won the women's, was 2 seconds off her own course record. So she didn't manage to beat that. But Emily Harrop in behind her. I mean, Axel Gachet-Molleret is the queen of verticals, but what I find so extraordinary is that the likes of Emily Harrop, who was second, and Margot Ravinel and Julia Morada, who were fourth and fifth respectively, such strong sprinters,
Yeah.
and yet still able to put in a huge showing on a World Cup level vertical the next day against the likes of Axel Gachet-Molleret, who's a specialist. And I mean, I just find that extraordinary because they are two completely different disciplines.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that was one of the Cam Smith sent in some feedback, and he said he was specifically impressed with those athletes who did very well, not only in the sprint on day one, but in the vertical on day two. And I think you're right that that's just a reflection of deep fitness and fatigue resilience. And, these are athletes we can expect a month from now to be quite strong on the line in Bormio. The third place woman was Sarah Dreyer. I think that was the only name we missed in the top five. And then also in sixth place, I think this is interesting. Giulia Morata was fifth for Italy. And then in sixth was Alba de Silvestro. just 2 seconds back, behind Julia, and especially in a time trial, you can't tell where anyone else is at. They're basically equal. And do you know, Catie? Now looking towards the Olympics, Team Italy there, can they both go? Is it only one or the other? This is
Yes,
like,
they can.
they're
They
looking
can
pretty
because
close.
they
Yeah.
have, as I understand it, they have Julia Murada qualified on her own, straight from the World Champs, I believe, or from the sprint list. I have it somewhere. I should have had it out in front of me. And then I believe Alba De Silvestro and Michele Boscacci will go because they get the host place. Italy has one for each. And as I understand it, that is how it is. But my 100% grasp of the quota places is not to be tested.
Yep. Yep.
There has been talk that maybe it won't be Michele, it might be Niccolò Canclini, but I think because Niccolò Canclini perhaps more multifunctional is perhaps the wrong word, polyvalent, they say in French, as opposed to because Michele Boscacci's sprint is not his strongest suit. But I believe from ears to the ground and, grapevine that I think it's going to be Julia, Alba and Michele.
Yep.
But we'll see.
Yeah. All righty. Yeah.
And then
yeah,
Julia Murada and Alba
here.
Di Silvestro are teammates, are like long distance and teammates for I mean, they're both exceptionally strong. When I say ski mountaineers, I mean when I mean sort of old school ski mountaineers, like they are unbelievably talented, high mountain ski mountaineers.
All right, audience, hoping to have interviews with both of those Italian women coming up here during our Olympics coverage. On to the men's side. Again, same winner as last year, same winner as usual, we will say. Remy Bonnet, he was at 20:02. I think his course record from the previous year I saw was 19:47. So he was right in that neighborhood. And then again, similar to usual, second place over a minute back, and that was Aurelien Gay. Third, Oriol Cardona Cole. Great performance, typically more focused on the shorter races. I think, was this his first World Cup podium in the vertical, Catie? Do you know?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so that's, again, good sign on fitness depth here going into the Olympics. Fourth, Paul Verbniak. Fifth place was Samuel Akey. And down to the Americans, 20th place, we had Cam Smith. He was at 22:10. And then in 35th, I believe, was Griffin Briley in 22:48. So, again, especially at the top of the podium there, we have on the men's and women's side, two highly dominant athletes who have been in that position really for quite some time. I think it's, an interesting question. Do we have the best two Skimo athletes are not doing the Olympics because there's not their disciplines? Thoughts on that, Catie? And I don't know if that's a fair question or not, because, the best in one thing doesn't necessarily mean the best in the other. But, obviously these are Olympic caliber athletes.
Oh, absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt. And it's just unfortunate that their disciplines are not going to the Olympics. And I think probably that, we know that's been a bit controversial. In my opinion, the reasons are valid, I guess, because they're the vertical and the individual, in which both of these athletes excel, are quite difficult to film. They're quite difficult to commentate on. They're quite difficult to, certainly with the individual, to make sure that if the weather comes in, what do you do? And but it is a real shame because both of them are just absolutely exceptional. And I would argue perhaps against the best ski mountaineers ever, because then you have to bring in, if you expanded it out to the individuals,
maybe
and
not ever.
the thing. No. I mean, like, currently, yes, absolutely dominant, certainly in the vertical and in the individual. But then you look at Emily Harrop, who is exceptionally strong across all the disciplines.
Yep.
And then, but it is a real shame because there are so many exceptional ski mountaineers who are not sprinters or mixed relay. You know, you look at, I mean, the Italians are particularly so strong in the long distance and the individual races and the team races. You know, the likes of, you know, I know Michele Boscacci is going, but he is more of a long distance. You look at Robert Antonioli, Matteo Idalin, William Bombardier of France. You know, there are so many of them that are so strong, and yet these are not the disciplines that they are strong in.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see moving forward because I think we're all hoping that in 4 years in France and or 8 years here in Utah in the U.S. that maybe one or both of those will be included in the Olympics, the vertical and or individual, maybe even a teams race. I mean, these things are awesome TV. The vertical, especially, is a bit easier to control in terms of formatting, etc. And I just wonder. I've been thinking about those two, Remy and Axel. Like, will they be around in 4 years? I don't know either personally, but I think maybe so, because the Olympics is a unique thing that keeps people, sometimes an athlete may be ready to hang it up or move on or do something else. But if the Olympics are out there, that might keep it going, you know. And if we look at Remy Bonnet, so he's 30. According to Skimo stats, he has 43 wins. 20 of those are World Cup wins. 6 are World Championship wins. Go to Axel on the women's side. She's 33, 113 wins, and 13 of those are World Championship wins, which, like, you know, again, mind blowing. And you might say 33 that's getting up there to be a world class athlete, but she strikes me as someone at that level. If she still wants to be at the top in 4 years with an Olympic motivation, you know. I'm voting for her right now as the winner for vertical and or individual in 4 years if it happens.
Yeah, I mean, she's an extraordinary athlete, exceptional. I mean, she was a world champion 8 months after she had her first baby. I mean, I was
Wow.
practically still in my pajamas 8 months after I had my first baby. And she is so strong and so determined and so very typical of what I think of as a sort of a traditional ski mountaineer. She's quite quiet. She's not, you know, sort of quite like a mountain person, if you know what I mean by
Yeah.
that. Sort of, you know, there's no showy side to her, sort of thing. And neither of them are showing any sign of getting, you know, of slowing down, quite literally and metaphorically. And then you look at, you know, with the exception of Mariana Jegorchikova in the sprint is a young person's game. But with the
Mhm.
vertical and the individual, you look at some of the best of them, they're going in their late 30s, 40s. I mentioned some of them already, but you know, there doesn't seem to be that kind of, okay, I'm too old now. You know, they just
Yeah.
get stronger. And Axel Gachet-Molleret, you know, multi-time winner of, you know, the Pyramenta and the Patrouille des Glaciers and all the sort of big long distance stuff. I don't think either of them. Well, I definitely don't think with Axel. I wonder about Remy because unless there is the possibility of the vertical, I'm not sure. I mean, end of last season, he said it. He said, I've got
Yeah,
nothing
I
left to
remember.
prove.
Yeah.
And he's given up once before, you know, in Skimo. So, but maybe that will be the carrot that keeps
Yeah,
him going.
exactly. An Olympic announcement, like that's the kind of thing that, you know, you're right. Here he is. He's winning all these races by like a huge margin. You know, maybe Olympics is that carrot, or you know, maybe not. He gets to do what he wants. For those out there who are wondering, how are these people so good? I couldn't find much of Axel's training data. She doesn't put much on Training Peaks, or excuse me, on Strava. But Remy puts pretty much everything on there. So, you know, how do you get this fast? Well, he's worked hard for years. He's got great genetics. He has great form. And listen to this. This is the amount of vertical gain per week that he's been doing. So January 5th through 11th, that was 39,000 feet of vertical. And I'm just going to go back week by week. The week before, 42,000 feet. Before that, 48,000 feet. Before
Oh,
that,
feet.
41,000. Before that, 49,000. And before that, 44,000. And that was more or less, there wasn't snow before that. That was early December. but these are these are doing that consistently. We have to assume he's also mixing in intensity and workouts in the midst of that. And then, of course, in the summertime, he's tearing it up in trail running. And then I also noticed in August, he had a big week of cycling, and he had 1 hour ride there, or one ride. It was 3.5 hours. And during that, this guy, he's listed at 61 kilograms, which is not, these are small athletes. He's not heavy, but at that weight, he was putting out 340 watts on a 10-minute climb. And for those, I don't think he was going all out. That wasn't, a peak performance, but to show over the course of a ride where he's just pedaling along, I think he averaged something like 287 watts for 3.5 hours. If you know anything about cycling power, like, these are big numbers for a person who, again, weighs 61 kilograms. So,
And
these
he's not
people are,
short.
yeah,
He's about the same height
he's
as
a
me.
tall,
He
skinny
must
guy.
be good sort of 6 foot tall.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that actually, another, you mentioned a person of the mountains. Here's another great person of the mountains, folks. Check out during the Olympics. We're going to put up our interview with Matteo Adeline, who you mentioned. This guy is awesome, and he is classic Skimo. He is the soul of Skimo. You're gonna just love what he said. But he mentioned, he said, basically, he's like, Remy Bonnet is the the Tadej Pogacar of Skimo, and we all kind of know Remy's probably gonna win. But if the rest of us have a really good day and things line up, maybe we'll be close, and maybe we'll beat him sometime. But it was a great view, and you're gonna love hearing about Adeli's training and his philosophy. It's really cool. It's old school. It's fun. It's like right up my alley. I'm
Do you
excited
know,
to.
I did not know he spoke English.
Pretty
I've
well.
always
What? Yeah.
there you go.
He did a
He's
yeah.
naughty. I always speak French with him because that I always thought
Yeah.
that was our only language in common. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I couldn't find another single English language interview. So Mateo, shout out, buddy. You did great, and we're excited to see that. I think the final thing in my notes, Catie, is Cam Smith's submissions. I'll just read these out again.
Mm-hmm.
He says the people who did well in both races impressed me the most, and that was Emily and Oriol, also Margot Ravenel, Julia Murata, and Johanna Heimer. It shows they're all in great shape. Cam says the sprint was open and gave good opportunities for passing, which I thought made for dynamic racing. And I think we saw that even within the diamonds, some people were kind of changing routes, and it was interesting to see. About his own race, Cam said, I was disappointed not to race better, but I am building up for Bormio. I backed way off intensity since Solitude, so that I wouldn't be overcooked after going so hard in November and December. I hope to be good by Boy Taul and then great in Bormio. So I think that's what Cam's going to do. And that was his plan all along. The American athletes were in an interesting position because late November, they had an in-house training camp that was head-to-head racing to basically see who is going to get to race at this all-important World Cup in Solitude in early December. And then at that World Cup, everyone was full gas. Let's try to get the qualifying spot. Let's do as well as we can to be on the team or to be an alternate. So they were peaking, or I think it was December 9th. And then Cam's plan from the start was to have a bit of kind of, I would say, back to base training, not as much intensity. And then over this final month to the Olympics, gain that momentum again. So he knows what he's doing, and I think he will. And I'm pumped to see American mixed relay. I think maybe there's podium potential.
Yeah, no, they did it exceptionally well. It was really, really exciting. And I mean, I've said many times before about athletes from other disciplines coming in and going, oh yeah, Skimo, and being absolutely knocked backwards because they don't understand how much is involved in the technique. But for Anna Gibson to come in, and not just the fitness, I'm not saying anyone can have it, but people have it, but the ability to master the transitions and the technique and it's just extraordinary. It's so unbelievably exciting. It was really exciting.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and she's a mindset killer. But who also has fun. Like one thing I love about Cam and Anna is they're like, they're laser focused and they know what to do and when, but they're also in it for the process and the experience and the team, and it's a pretty cool balance. But yeah, highly impressive to be able to nail those skills. And you would also, I would say like, God, that's Anna's first World Cup. You would assume it's probably going to get better. Like you almost, you can't help, but you just get more comfortable. That first climb at Solitude, she got a little boxed in. You could tell she was kind of figuring things out. You get smoother and smoother, and you're able to predict more and more as things come. As we wrap it up, looking forward, two more World Cups before the Olympics. We got Andorra. That is another sprint and vertical starting January 25th. And then we got Boitaul the following weekend, January 31st. And that is a relay and a sprint. Catie, I find it interesting. There's only one mixed relay before the Olympics here. Uh, what do you have any? I don't know. Is that by design? Is it that just they're harder to set up? Like I would, at least in my mind, if I was, master of the Skimo courses, I'd make a mixed relay every World Cup before the Olympics. But I know that those things aren't necessarily. Well, it's not the same organization or anything.
Yeah, it is a little surprising, actually. I don't know why. I have no insight to that. The only thing I can think of is that, sometimes the LOCs just don't have the experience. For example, Andorra next weekend, or 25th, 26th, I mean, they used to always traditionally be a vertical and an individual, and they have given up their individual and replaced it with a sprint last year for the very first time. And so I just think it's possibly to do with where they are and who can handle the setup. But I honestly, that's like a stab in the dark kind of guess.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
But we know
Any
that
predict?
yeah, sure, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, any predictions that you want to share, Catie? Whether it's the upcoming World Cups, they could be specific results, they could be general concepts. What do you think is going to happen out there?
I think we're just going to see more of what we saw in Courchevel, actually. I think just people working towards it. And one of the things I'm really interested in is, I said it to Nikki during the broadcast in Courchevel, is how are they managing this sort of the massive pressure of going to the Olympics for those
Hmm.
who are going or may be going, but also remembering that this is still a really long World Cup season. There's a
Yes.
lot to think about, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot to get to do really well in one and not do well in the other, sort of thing. And the other thing I'm just so excited to hear about is the final selections, especially for the French team, because they're the ones where, the huge pressure on the French athletes in Courchevel on home soil to kind of get those last two spots. I'm gonna put my money on Margot Ravenel
Hmm.
in the women. I think that's probably a no-brainer, and I feel that it is so hard if it's not Celia Perepesi, because she has been
Yeah.
the bridesmaid, the chief matron of honor all along, the one that we all thought would be there, but I don't know that it will be, and that's going to be hard. That's going to be really hard if it's not. And for the men, well, Pablo Giner put in the best performance at the weekend. I do feel also a little bit for Robin Galando, though, because he was building and building and building, and then he had two fairly major injuries 2 seasons in a row. So we'll soon see. I'm excited about that. I just wanted to say one other thing, if I may. It's to do with the vertical and comebacks, and it was to say how amazing it was to see Daniel Ganal back on the start line for the vertical for Austria, because talking of nasty accidents, 18 months ago he had a really horrific accident that took him right out, emergency tracheotomy on site, and had to relearn to walk and everything, and is back on a World Cup start line, and just brilliant. It was just so brilliant to see that.
Wow. Oh man, good for him. And you're right to get 18 months to get back to that level. That's awesome. Way to go. That French selection, Catie, do you know, is that January 26th? I know other teams are announcing that day, or do we
Well,
know?
that's the official Olympic selection date, I believe. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But the Italians have told me that they know that they're not being properly announced until the 26th. I think the Swiss are the only team that I know of that have officially announced their selection. I think the Americans have as well, but the Swiss put out a big announcement last week. But all the rest are either through from, the World Championships, or we all just kind of know because it's been on social media.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, when you and I come back following the Andorra World Cup, we will probably have more information on selections.
We will.
American audience, many of you know Cam Smith and Anna Gibson are slated to do the mixed relay, and then I believe the alternates who will go to Bormio and probably not race, unless something happens. That's Jesse Young and Griffin Briley, with no Americans in the sprint race. So American audience, February 21st is the mixed relay. That's where you'll get to see these guys doing their thing. If you want to watch it live, it's probably going to be at 3 or 4 a.m. or something like that, but it is worth getting up early to check into this stuff. And I'll throw it back in that predictions. Catie, I think I don't know if Anna Gibson will do any vertical World Cups this year, but I think if she does, that she will hit the podium in the vertical.
Mm.
And my other prediction is for frequent guest on Skimo Gold, Max Drion of Belgium. I think there's a shot for Max to be on the podium in the sprint at either the Olympics or the World Championship. He's been knocking on that door, and it's so hard to break through. But I think Max has got a shot. I'd be
Oh, I
curious to see.
100% agree with you. He had a bit of a shocker this week in Courchevel. He wasn't well, but no, he is on absolutely cracking form. And I saw him in person after the vertical race in Maljean, the Swiss Cup at the end of December, and he
Yes.
came in like seconds behind Remy Bonnet, and he was absolutely on fire. On fire.
Yeah. All righty. Well, Catie, thanks a ton. Any final thoughts or any other places you want the listeners to find you online, Instagram, anything like that?
Oh, well, I mean, yes, you can find me on Instagram at Catie Friend, Catie with a C. But no, you know me, I could talk about this for days, but I think we should probably wrap it up.
I think so. Well, Catie, thanks so much. You're such a value to this because you are a pro and you know all the athletes and you know all the history. So we appreciate you being here and look forward to more. Hey, thanks as always for listening to Skimo Gold. Let us know what you think of this race analysis format. Hit us up on Instagrams, slide into the DMs, as they say, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube. Give us some comments. Let us know what you think about the race analysis. Give us some feedback. What do you want to be covered in future race analysis episodes? Catie and I are going to be back just about a week from now, as we said, analyzing the Andorra World Cup and then keeping them coming throughout the season. So let us know, what do you like? What do you don't like? What would you like to see more of? Be sure to check out Catie on Instagram. Check out Cam from CB on Instagram as he gets ready for the Olympics. I'm on Instagram at Travis Macy. Skimo Gold is there. You can check out our Skimo Gold website. That's skimogold.com. Check out my website, travismacy.com. Endurance coaching information, books, keynotes, personal development coaching, and so forth. And of course, be sure to check out our producers. That's Palm Tree Pod Co. Anthony Palmer on the team, cranking these things out. We've got some big work together coming up to the Olympics period, folks. We are going to give you a lot of content, and it's going to be a lot of work from all of us, but I think it's going to be worth it. So get ready to follow along. All right, that's it for now. We will catch you next time on Skimo Gold.